Welcome, everyone, to the ExecuBalance podcast, where we dive into what it looks like to have balance in our professional and personal pursuits. I'm Chad Crow. I'll be your host for this episode. I'm also the CEO of Techwood Digital and father to 4, husband to 1, so I know what it's like to have a crazy schedule and struggle to find balance. Before we begin today's episode, I want to invite you to help us continue the conversation by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We look forward to connecting and having deeper conversations so that we all can grow together and continue this podcast. So please connect with us there, as well as make sure to visit our website at ExecuBalance.com. All right. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Chad.
So I guess the best way to start off these things is usually to run through and get to know you a little bit. And I think the best way to do that might be to try to understand some of the roles that you are playing kind of in life right now, roles with work and personal life and all of that.
Yeah. So probably for the last 10 years, I've been semi-retired. I was a pastor for a while and then sold a company. And then about 10 years ago, started working with an organization in Southern California called Convene. Basically what Convene does is we work with faith-based CEOs and business owners to help them think through how to integrate their faith beyond the church. In other words, how to help their communities to flourish, how to help their families flourish, how to become the full-orbed leader that their faith drives them to want to become. So that was actually started the group that you're a member of in May of 2010. And at the time, I had been working full-time with partners in my former business, starting another software company that did software for the construction design community. Which was really a fun thing. But once I started doing Convene, I just absolutely fell in love with it. Just the opportunity to have impact in individuals' lives, but not just that, to have impact in their families, impact in the communities that their businesses serve, the employees, and to help them really take that, And part of it, we're talking about balance today, part of that is how do you integrate, how do you help your employees? Because obviously sometimes as a boss, you'd rather they worked 85 hours a week, right, and forget their families. But our responsibility is not only just for ourselves, but for them as well. So that's probably the bulk of my part-time work. It's 15, 20 hours a week. So my background was I was a pastor in Baltimore City, urban church. Couldn't afford to pay me a lot, and I went to work for a company called Construction Market Data. Any of your folks that are in the construction field would know it as CMD. So my background was in, it's kind of that balance between, I tell people I speak pastor and I speak business guy. And there's not too many people that are bilingual like that. Also in the last 10 years or so, I went back to my graduate school and earned my doctorate. The topic of the dissertation was discipling C-level executives. And again, it's because I don't think our pastors are taught, our rabbis aren't taught, how to talk to you about what happens in your world, not my world. And so probably the other role that I'm kind of busy on right now is I'm just in the process of having a book published. It'll come out in September, and it's on that role of how do I teach a pastor to talk to you about the significance of your faith outside of the church. Okay? And then one of my favorite roles is we're expecting our 10th and 11th grandchild. So matter of fact, I had one of them over today, and I play a little guitar, and he always comes in and says, "P, play me the guitar." And he sits up in my chair with me, and it's just like, it's like heaven.
And then, of course, to have that many grandkids, that means you must have a
well,
lot
we
of
have,
kids.
Yeah, of course, we have seven children. I tell people I have a favorite daughter because we have 6 boys, and then just my girl. They're all grown now. So you can imagine, talking about balance, there was a time when I had 4 teenagers.
Oh my God.
And another time when I had 4 in high school.
Wow. Yeah, I've got 4 kids, and we've got one in middle school, and we're already starting to see that teenage sass start to come on.
Yeah.
And my gosh, it's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah, I think, I tell people one of the proudest things of my life is really 2 things. Number one is, we had 7 children, and I had a busy life, and I think accomplished a lot of things, did a lot of stuff. But I think my children will tell you I missed very few of the really important things in their lives. And so that's a question of, you have to learn a certain level of skill to be able to manage to pull that off. And I think the second most significant thing is they still talk to me.
Yeah. And they enjoy your company, right?
They come visit. I see all my kids, at least 3 of them belong to my golf club. So I see them playing golf. We get together. Usually, COVID's been a little tricky this year, but usually we get together once a month as a family for a Sunday dinner. We used to like it was going to be the 3rd Sunday of every month, but it never worked out. So now we call it Some Sunday.
I love it.
My wife just figures out sometime during the month when everybody's available, and we get to do it. Yeah, so that's roughly that's what I'm busy holding together.
Awesome. No, I think just so many great opportunities to have, I think, impactful conversations around all that you've done, and I think what kind of speaks to me a little bit is you had an impactful career in growing and exiting a software type company, and then it seems like the way you navigated a lot of the stress and different competing roles in your life, it seems the way that you were able to balance it was with this whole other skill set that you developed by being a pastor and finding really balance through faith.
I think to some degree that's it. I would clarify one thing. It wasn't technically a software company. It was a data information company. So if you were in commercial construction, you needed to know when projects were being designed so you can get your product specified, or you needed to know when they bid so you could get your bids in. Frankly, we had people who did food trucks that wanted to know when construction sites opened so they could plan their schedules. But we started it in the 80s, and then, of course, in the 90s, data transitioned to the internet. You can imagine when we started business, technology was a little pink slip that said when you were out. I mean, that was really the extent of it. And, of course, so we had a huge learning curve. So in 1994, which I don't know if you know the time, but October 1994 was when the internet became sort of under public domain. And we launched the first construction product website in November of 94. And I remember it like it was yesterday, a debate with my partners at our management team level. And there was a bullet point on my PowerPoint that said, there's already 4,000 websites out there. We've got to get going. Because you had no idea.
Right, and now there's hundreds of billions.
There's probably 4,000 a day, right, or an hour.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah. So it was really a data business, but we became known as a technology business, and sort of traded value wise, even though it was privately held in kind of a NASDAQ perspective.
To dive into more of your role in that story, like obviously a big company. You've told me a little bit about, you were kind of the innovator. You went to new markets.
Yeah.
So I hear that, and I hear stress. Like, that's what I hear.
That's interesting.
So talk to me a little bit about your role there.
Yeah, and to some degree, it's. I think I was fortunate to have a role that fit my personality. Basically, give you a sense of scope. When we sold it, we had about 1,800 employees in 18 countries. I was primarily responsible for, my division was called National Accounts, and it was the several $100,000 million accounts, mostly building product manufacturers and national companies in the United States. And I had, I think, probably about a $25 million, the business was about $150 million when the last budget we put together after the sale. And about $25 million of that was mine. But while I always ran that division, what I learned early on, and this is, maybe a balance issue, our senior partner, my boss for the 20 years we were there, was a great visionary, and he just saw things that I marveled at, right? But I had most of my other partners were implementers. Okay, so if you've been in an organization long, you realize those two people, if not managed, bang heads. With the net result that the implementers thought, well, not only does he build sandcastles in the air, he moves in, right? He would talk to us at a management meeting on Monday morning about something he wants done, and by Friday he's telling people it's in place. That's just sort of that visionary leader. He just so believes. And then, of course, the implementers get frustrated because they, does he not realize you can't, and you got to have, and we're going to need a budget. And so they look at each other like he's crazy. These guys are saying he's crazy. And these guys say all they ever do is what can't be done, right? So it turned out I could kind of live with the ambiguity between those two. I could live with the vagueness of not knowing how many calls you had to make, how many trips you had to take, how many employees you were going to need. And so really, I did about 20 different new products or new locations for the first year, got it 0 to 60, and then was able to turn it over. By then we knew, right? We knew what the plan was. We knew what worked and what didn't work. And so I really thrived on that. For me, balance was I need constant stimulation. It's just my personality. If you ever come look in my office, it's like, a million pictures, paintings, collect art, I've collected postcards of every place I've ever been, so they're all over the place. Atlanta United flags all over the place. But so I was just knowing who I was, right? And so after the end of the year, I'm looking for, my batteries are drained, right? I want to be challenged with something new, something exciting. So I could keep up this responsibility, but I did mostly delegating there. I had good leader team there, and I would spend the bulk of my time on the new. And again, it's personality. I know you're. Here's the difference. I had the ability, because it was a new, we don't know the answers. I had the ability to fail. I had the instructions to fail, right? It was go figure out how many of these we have to do in order to make this work. And so, that's it sort of took that stress off for you. You're the CEO of the business, right? And if it fails, it's your problem. So it was kind of, I guess I thought about it this way. The organization was big enough that I never had to worry about whether I was going to get paid, right? And that took it, but I still got the ability to experience the excitement of being an entrepreneur over and over and over again, so that was also but again, I think I bring all that back to, the famous statement by Socrates, know thyself. Or Plato, I guess that was, if you know yourself and you try to, they say Bob Beale, I'm sure you're familiar with, you hear me quote him a lot. Bob Beale, let me see, what was I going to leave with that? Says nothing motivates like results, right? And so the idea is, you get out there, and when you're accomplishing things, it's very motivational. But anyway, I think knowing yourself is really.
How did you get to know yourself so well? It sounds like by the time you had gotten into CMD, you were pretty set in, okay, here's a playground where I can succeed. But I think that's a challenge for people to get there.
Yeah, so I fell into this role that was just suited, and I think part of that was our senior partner understood. He knew me better than I knew myself, right? And he understood my need for the new challenge. And it's interesting. Tom Peters, one of the first business books I ever read, that's back when, that was a few years ago, says that every employee wants two things. Number one, they want to meld in. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be put up on a pedestal. So that's their primary desire, is they want to be just part of the team. And they want to be known for something at which they excel. So it's almost contradictory. And so I think what Errol did is he made us feel, Errol was our senior partner, he made us feel part of the team, but then he kind of found what each of us, and he called it out of us, right? And that's what, it's kind of one of the things that's exciting to be about working with Convene, working with CEOs like yourself, is as I get to know each of you, I can call out what I see to be your best. And that allows you to, to move into that role.
Awesome, yeah. Great story. I think that's a huge lesson, is find out where you're fulfilled and focused there, and that'll give you some.
I will share a tool that, matter of fact, I'm teaching. Did I mention I'm teaching at Metro Atlanta Seminary as well? That was the other role that I'm doing after I got my doctorate.
While you're semi-retired, you're teaching,
well,
mentoring.
People say, "Man, you do a lot of stuff." I said, "Well, really, I don't do a lot of stuff. I do a lot of important stuff, and I get all the unimportant stuff off the plate." Anyway, I'm sorry. Where was I headed?
Teaching a class.
Oh yeah, I'm teaching a class right now on kind of the nature of what's in my book is how to, if you're leading a Bible study or you're leading a faith-based group, how to talk about stuff that's more germane to their lives. Too often we talk about what happens at church, right? Or maybe what happens at the nonprofit, but we don't really talk about the power that you have to shepherd, the 20 or 30 or 40 employees that you've got here at Techwood, right? I mean, that's your calling, right? And so as I learn to talk to people about their unique calling, not mine, but their unique calling, one of the things I encourage them to do is write a life plan. So I did that after, when we sold CMD, I was 46, I had a good bit of money, had a little bit of freedom to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I started working, I was in a group at my church that was working through developing a life plan. And at the time, I remember somebody challenged me. He says, you have now had 20 different business plans for your businesses, but you don't have one for your life. And I thought, wow, you're right. What's more important at the end of the day, right? Your life is more important. And that's where balance comes from. So anyway, in working through that, I kind of started asking myself, and this is another Bob Beal question, and I asked my friends, what is my greatest strength? What is the one thing that I do better than anybody I know, better than anything else that I do? And I started asking friends and family, and what I discovered, it was kind of the role I had at CMD. It was translating vision into practice. So now, after 20 years, I have a mission statement that says, God has gifted, called, and positioned me to help his visionaries find, plan, and execute their role in the kingdom. And the idea there is just, learning, I think it's what I do well. And so that it led me to, as a Convene chair. That's the perfect job description for someone with that calling, right? But what I found at the time, and this we talk about balance, was the ability to help my children and my wife. So what I found that before I recognized that, I was very directive at home. Wife, you should lose 10 pounds and you should go to the gym. And you should.
That went over well.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's just, and kids, stop doing that. Don't chew your fingernails. And then I said, well, I really ought to treat all my relationships like I treat my business role, right? And so I changed that around. So now it's like, for the last 20 years, and it really has worked out much better, is I talk with my wife about what are her dreams? How can I help her get where she wants to be, as opposed to me telling her where I think she ought to go. And I've started businesses in some shape or form with all my kids. Matter of fact, I just worked out with my oldest two sons a business that we started 17 years ago, I guess, and they're finally buying me out after they ran it for all those years, but.
I just to pause. I think this is a great nugget because I've heard you say before, I'm not leaving the kids anything, but what I will do is I'll start a business with them now.
Yeah, that was kind of what we've let them know is we don't, I don't think it's a good idea for me to leave a bunch of money to your kids because they don't know how it was made. My kids know how it was made, right? But that's not who I'll be leaving it to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If I leave them a lot of money, then all of a sudden their kids are going to get a bunch of money without ever having seen what it takes to make it. Now, my kids, like I say, to some degree or another, have earned their wealth or are earning their wealth. And in some cases, we've had the ability. I'm actually just in the process. Think this fall we're going to, I wonder if I can say this. Actually, I'll just say with my daughter and son-in-law, a major business is going to be bought.
I think that's great. And then you, with your other two sons, I know Ransom and
Mason,
they have the basically the band kind of rent a space.
Yeah, it's called Vision Studios. And what it is, it's and again, it's helping. My oldest son was in bands. I had a band in Decatur, was living in the house with some other band members. And after the third time the police came because they were playing at 2 a.m. and the neighbors didn't like it, they said, next time we come, we'll arrest you. And so he said, Dad, we gotta do something about this. And so we started looking around, and there were a couple, but they were all full. And so we're the only one that's still operating these many years later. And we bought a 35,000 square foot warehouse and originally built out 60 soundproof rehearsal spaces that we rent on a monthly basis. And now there's like 85, and then there's a big stage room where Mason's been doing live streaming for bands that can't play out with COVID. And that's been, 2003 we got that building.
But what a testament to the statement you said about realizing that you can run your family more just like you're running with your businesses and finding something that your son is passionate about and just zeroing in on it.
Right. And that's, and with each of my kids, I think they've, obviously they've seen a model. They've seen me kind of do what play to my strengths. But to some degree, I'm sure I've had opportunity to just advise them that, this would be a good decision for you, this would not.
And you talked about developing a life plan, much like a business plan. Mm-hmm. You talked about your personal mission statement. What other things would be included in a personal plan if I was to sit down and say, okay, I need to
Good question.
Need to write this out?
Yeah, one things that so balance is all about knowing who you are and making sure that you're paying attention to the important things. Okay, it's too easy to pay attention, especially 4 kids, a growing business, new divisions. I get it, right? Excuse me. But when all that's flying at you, it's hard to know what to swat and what to catch and what have you. So the idea of a personal life plan, and then when my personal life plan has the high level, I just quoted one of them to you, but then it also has one for each role that I play. So I put that life principles, core values, et cetera, into, okay, what does it mean to be as a husband? What does it mean to be as a father? What does it mean to be as a grandfather? And then I have a little chart. It lists out my roles and then asks you, if I were working with you on it, to fill in 2 activities, which if you monitored and you did every week, every month, every day, every year, whatever it might be, you'd be a better father. You'd be a better husband. You'd be a better boss. And then I just have a little dashboard that I monitor those activities.
You set KPIs and make sure you're achieving them.
Yeah, so
Novel thought.
The point is, I want to be a better husband. Well, I could just hope I'm going to be a better husband next year, right? Or I could say, no, I think I could improve my husbanding if I ABC. And then I have a little thing each morning when I sit down and kind of do my morning, get back in the world. I'll kind of a list of things that you can't really schedule, but they're interactions, intentional interactions with grandchildren or children or friends. Some things can be scheduled, so you can look, I have a certain amount of time I want to work out each week. And so I can go back on my calendar and look, I can count those. And then some things are an annual retreat kind of thing where, you just put those on a calendar and do them.
So do you visit your life plan every morning?
No,
Okay.
no. I visit by KPIs.
Okay.
So
your dashboard. Gotcha.
I figure, so once a week I review the dashboard. Once a day I look at the random things, the things that aren't scheduled. And the reason for that is, I could have had a V8. Oh, I was with Mason yesterday and I could have, had a relational moment, and guess what? We didn't, right? So, but, if I'm looking at that in the morning, I'm saying, I'm going to be with grandson today. How do I make it a special time?
Gotcha. So by realizing the opportunity missed, you can grab it next time.
You can grab it because if you're looking forward as opposed to, I could have done that yesterday, but it's too late. Well, no, I can do it today if I know they're coming over.
You mentioned having even mission and core values as part of that life plan. Mm-hmm. How much of that life plan does your wife know? How included in your mission and your core values are you? Do you do that together?
Very much and not so much. We're separate individuals by design. In other words, she's a member of a Russian Orthodox church. I'm a member of a Presbyterian church. Go figure. There's so that in some sense we have very distinct fields. But both of our core values is family, right? And so that's an area where we're really tied in. We did in 2012 was the year I started my second Convene group and decided that's what it means to go into the sunset for me, is to be, as long as God gives me breath, to work with business owners. And we spent that year talking. A lot of times we talked about what do we want to be true of our lives, And for her, it was all about grandchildren, So the house that she envisioned, the relationship she envisioned, that she had come up with a phrase that kind of guided that year for us, and that phrase was, "We want to be people with time for people." That's mind-blowing. I mean, we all need people, right? Any one of us that are around, you need somebody that'll just sit down and listen to you. Sarah needs somebody that'll just sit down, and there's just not a lot of those people. I always try when I was in asteroid time, I always tried to be available, but it would be like, we'll check with my assistant, and maybe 2 months from now we'll get a lunch.
Yeah, people with time for people.
People with time for people.
That's a big statement.
Yeah. And so for me, it was, I'm still definitely for the grandchildren, but that wasn't the center of my world. For me, it's more, people that are, mostly businessmen, because that's my sphere, who just need a listening ear. Maybe they're looking for a job, they're networking for their next thing, they've got an idea for a business they want to start. And
you've turned into a hub for that activity.
Right.
It's like, I can't tell you how many resumes I get from Tom now. Every day.
Because everybody, sometimes I think my name's on the bathroom wall. You need a job, call Tom. Here's my number. But I get joy out of that, right? That's another thing about balance. I started to say earlier, Bob Beal says, you ought to be thinking about doing 70 or 80% of your time with things that energize you. And keep to 20 or 30% of the time some things you just got to do. I've got to write checks to my vendors. I'm a one-man show, but I got to put checks in the bank, and I got to write checks to pay the bills. And one Saturday morning, it's like, oh, geez. So that's a drainer for me. But really, people should be thinking in terms of, what are the things which, when I do them, I feel energy. And then try to do more of those and see if you can't delegate those things that the answer is no. When I do that, I'm tired, and it drains me emotionally. And if you can stay in that 60 to 80 range of energizing, 20 to 40 range of de-energizing, that's a great balanced place to be.
And I think that one of the things people don't talk about a lot of is money as a tool.
Yeah.
And that's it, is if you can view money more as a tool to help you balance that 20/80, and focus on the things that's in your life plan of importance.
Yeah.
There's, what is it, Jerry Black, he says, there's no higher purpose for a dollar than to be focused on what God wants it to do.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And so I love that. And so every dollar that I make and can reinvest into kind of my life plan. And my life plan, similar to yours, is I think it has a faith base to it. And that's a choice that I've made that I think is essential to balance in my life, is to have that as a massive component.
Right.
But I think, a life purpose doesn't necessarily have to be faith-based. But I think having a purpose.
It's got to have a purpose. It has to be purpose-based. In my case, that purpose flows out of my faith. I believe that God created me to do what I'm doing, and that I believe God created this physical world, and that when he created this world, it's interesting, he put the image bearer, Adam and Eve, in the garden, said three things. This place is empty. I want you to create abundance. This place has infinite potential. I want you to cultivate all that's there. And the most interesting one is, this place is incomplete and dangerous. I want you to subdue it. So harnessing the power of electricity, harnessing the power of wind and water, fire, in order that all that can be brought together so that we eliminate poverty. Our world flourishes, right? When every dollar circulates several times in a community, that community flourishes. I read earlier at the beginning of COVID an interesting article, and I forget just where it was, but it suggested that this might be a time to begin to use your wealth to eat out more.
Yeah.
Counterintuitive, right? Because I'm thinking, I don't like to go out and waste money on, I'm just not, I don't know, I'm a little conservative on that stuff. But my wife and I started thinking, wait a minute, our community is not going to be the same if we don't support. And so we probably either eat out or take out 3 times, 4 times more than we ever did before. And part of that is just, I've got the resources, and we're trying to keep some businesses in our community that we want to be there when this whole thing is over. We're trying to keep them afloat, right? What better use of my money? And not only that, but then I get good meals.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and then you get, for me, I get more balance at home because the kitchen's not a mess that we have to clean, the wife doesn't have to slave over the stove.
And it's also things like, at my old house back in the day, we had people do the lawn, we had people do the chemicals on the lawn, we had people do window washing, all that stuff. And you could think of that as conspicuous consumption, or you could think of it as we're helping the community to flourish. We're providing employment, right? We could have hoarded everything and had lots of money in the bank, got lots of interest every month, but it wouldn't have enriched the lives outside of our family.
An amazing conversation. I think we're running short on time.
Oh, yeah, it goes quick.
Of course, absolutely. But it's been a real pleasure. I think one of the biggest takeaways is just making sure I have that life purpose written out. I'll tell you just kind of a quick story. I don't, I've gotten to what a mutual friend of ours, Alf, calls the rinse cycle. As we started having kids and getting in that over and over again, I do find that the more business principles I can bring into my life, like defining core values and a mission, and I include my wife in that, the easier decision-making gets, just like it did in my business. Yeah. As soon as Techwood had, come hell or high water, this is who we're going to be, and we've all agreed on that.
It eliminates all the consideration of the decisions that are
You can wipe off, a lot of the unnecessary conversations because we have direction. And I think that was a big aha moment for me, is to start to develop those things at home so that I can be more poignant and intentional with my time there.
Intentional is maybe the most important word. My son Sam, he'll turn 31 this year, has a T-shirt that says, "Be careful what you're becoming." right? And too many people become something, and, they look up one day and they're 48, 54, whatever it is, and they go, man, how did I get here? I don't want to be here, right? But it's all the little decisions that were made without a destination context, and before you know it, they're stuck, without balance. And they're on a treadmill that they don't have any reasonable way to get off of. And that's, so some people think the idea of core values and mission, vision, purpose statements is limiting. From my perspective, it's hugely freeing, because it lets you be intentional about what's important.
Awesome. And I think physically writing out a life plan is probably going to be the next level up for me.
Yeah.
I think we've had those conversations, me and Sarah, and I think we are a lot on the same page, but I think having that intentionally written out in a place where I normally revisit it. And then it's a very convicting thing when you start thinking about, how am I going to measure this, right? Like, it's like, oh God,
that's
going to have
really
teeth
the key.
now.
The life plan's only as good as the implementation. I remember I had a student years ago, and I asked him, so have you ever written a life plan? He said, oh yeah, I've got my life plan. I said, well, where is it? He said, well, it's in storage somewhere. I said, well, that's not really doing you a lot of good, right? You got to have a plan to implement it, and be intentional about it.
And I'm going to ask a favor, if you don't mind. Like, I would love to get kind of a template together for what a life plan looks like.
Oh, I'll share the one that I developed for my company years ago, and I use with the students that we're doing.
Excellent, yeah. And we'll put it on our website. I'll go through it, and I think that'll be a really good tool for me, and make it available to anybody who wants to log on the website and download it. I think.
Be happy to. I will share with you my life plan, but don't put that on your website.
Fair enough. Okay, awesome. And then I think the next big takeaway is if like me and like you, if faith is a driving factor for your life plan, and you are a CEO. I think one of the bigger things I've taken away in the last 2 years is the peace that I find in having like-minded people in a group that I can bring issues to.
Who think like you do. Share your core values.
And so, again, being able to wipe away the conversations that don't matter and focus on the ones that do is the value that I've found being a Convene meeting member. And so if somebody was interested in that, what's the best way to learn more about Convene, and if there's a group near them?
Yeah, so the website is convenenow.com. We have groups, I guess there's, I don't even know anymore, there's probably 60 or 70 chairs. I'm called chairperson of the round table. All the way across California to East Coast
New
Atlanta.
York, I know there's a
New
big
York,
group in New York.
Seattle's just starting up, bunch in Texas, bunch in Denver. There's 3 here in Atlanta, actually 4 here in Atlanta. One's a virtual. There's several virtual events that are just all Zoom-based. So there's a lot of options, but that's the best place to start, convenenow.com.
Excellent. And there's all kinds of CEO groups you can be a part of, like Vistage.
Vistage. Well. Not that there are not a lot of faith-based companies in Vistage, but that's sort of a requirement in Convene, that commonality. But Vistage is much bigger than Convene, but serves the same purpose for someone who might not necessarily be a faith-based individual.
Excellent. So just a big takeaway: be intentional, be focused. Yeah. Find what you're good at. Find people who you can share that with, even if that's your family. Find ways to share what you're good at with your kids, and that's where you've seemed to have found balance and joy.
There were times. Obviously, as we were growing up, there were very stressful years. My wife and I laugh. We'll be married 46 years this year, and probably 39 happily. So, there were years that were, I don't want it to sound like I've figured it all out, but I'm now 66, and I think what I've done is I like to learn quickly from my mistakes, rather than keep making them over and over, and then really kind of create a strategy to move forward.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I
appreciate it. Glad to be here. It's been fun.